I'm Celine, welcome or welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different from what I usually do. I know I know that on this channel I usually talk about classics, but I do also very much enjoy other genres, and one of my favourite genres of all time is fantasy. A little while ago I bought something that I call the box, which was a box of secondhand fantasy books, and it was extremely cheap, so think like 20 books for £15 kind of cheap. And I originally bought the box because there were some books in it that I really wanted and that I was specifically looking for, books that I had read when I was a child. But in the box there were also tons of other fantasy books that I had never really heard of. However, since then, the books from the box have just sort of been languishing on my shelves, and I think it's a good idea to actually open the books, look into them. I'm going to read the first chapter or the first 10 pages or whatever feels right, and then decide whether these are actually books I'm interested in or whether these are books that I'm just going to put on my donate sell pile. Usually when I buy a book, I will look into reviews, I will look into what other people thought, that sort of stuff, but with these, I'm just gonna go in blind. I'm going to see whether the writing style agrees with me, whether I find the story setup interesting enough, or whether I'm just a bit like, this isn't for me. So pretty much everything that is in the box was classic fantasy, as in like from the 80s, 90s, that sort of era. But I'm going to add 2 more modern fantasies to this little challenge thing that I'm doing as well, because there were also secondhand books that I picked up and didn't know that much about, and I think it would be nice to give them a try and see if I want to keep them and want to, spend time and money on to complete the series and read it all, or whether I'm just like, well, this is not for me. So the first one that I will be trying is Temeraire by Naomi Novik. I mainly picked this up because I really like the cover. The only thing I know about it is that it's a relatively long series, so I thought it was at least 6 installments, and that this was about the Napoleonic War but with dragons. Which, to be fair, sounds really fun, and I have read from Naomi Novik before, so I think this is definitely a good contender for me to actually keep. Then I also have Mage by Stephen Aryan, which I actually don't know anything about, and I've never read Stephen Aryan before, although I have watched some of his videos on YouTube, so if you're interested in videos about publishing, and particularly traditional publishing from a fantasy author perspective, from someone who lives in the UK, then definitely check out his channel. I usually quite like books about magic, so the title Mageborn sounded interesting, so I look forward to seeing what I think of this. And then we really enter the box territory. So the first one I have is Dragons of a Fallen Sun, which is The War of Souls Volume 1 by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. I also have Lords of the Middle Dark, which is The Rings of the Master Book 1 by Jack L. Chalker, which is science fiction rather than fantasy, but I often, in my mind, sort of group those 2 genres together. I also have The Diamond Throne by David Eddings, which is book 1 of the Elenium. I really like the colour of this cover. Then I also have Witch Fire by James Clemens, which is book 1 of The Banned and the Banished, and the subtitle it has on this cover is Immortal Magic, Infinite Vengeance. Then also by David Eddings, I've got Domes of Fire, which is book 1 of the Temeraire. I don't know whether these series are connected in any way, I guess I'll find out. Then from Modesitt Jr., I have The Soprano Sorceress, which is book 1 of the Spell Song cycle. And then the final book from the box is The Mirror of Her Dreams by Stephen Donaldson, which is, I think, book 1 in something called Mordant's Need. I'm going to read the first chapter of some of these books and I will report back later. So I finished the first 10-ish pages of Temeraire by Naomi Novik, and I think this one is going to be a keeper. It sort of opens on like the aftermath of a ship battle, and this one guy finds a dragon egg on a friend ship. And although I think perhaps the story might be a little bit more military than I am generally drawn to, I found the premise compelling enough that I'm quite happy to read the rest of this book. I've also finished the first chapter of Mageborn, and I think this is one that is going to go on my donate/sell pile. The opening scene of this one is quite grim, which gives me the impression that I think the rest of the book is going to be quite dark, which isn't something I'm that drawn to in fantasy, which is a shame because grimdark is quite big in fantasy ever since the success of Game of Thrones. And it seems like the story is going to be about magic users who are blamed for some horrible event that happened in the past, so they're really oppressed and abused and that sort of stuff, which isn't really the type of theme that I really look for in fantasy. So sadly, this one is not for me. Then I finished the first chapter of The Mirror of Her Dreams by Stephen Donaldson, which is in the series Mordant's Need. So the concept of this is there's a woman who's basically an analog for Rapunzel, except that she's in contemporary times, and so she's locked into an apartment rather than, you know, a medieval tower type situation. And then this knight comes galloping through her mirror and he whisks her away into this fantasy land where she will do things. I have to admit, that concept didn't really grab me. And I have to say that the writing style itself also didn't really intrigue me much. I felt like, in a way, it really repeated itself. And how that's even possible when you're just reading the first chapter, I don't know. But it felt like even the first chapter was already really drawn out, which isn't very promising for this 600-page novel. I think for me, this one is a miss as well. The Sorceress Soprano is another one that I think I'll keep. I read the first two, I would say chapters, but they were quite brief sections. So the first section is set in this fantasy world where sorcerers use music to do magic. And then the second section moves to our contemporary world, although I think this was written in the 90s or something. So contemporary with an asterisk, where a woman is preparing to sing for a dean at a university, but she wishes she is going to be anywhere else, and then it looks like she's going to be sucked into this fantasy world. Now, this only gave me like a tiny glimpse because this is quite a long book and I think it's a 5-book series, but I was intrigued enough that I think I'm happy to keep it. So I gave The Diamond Throne a try by David Eddings, and I think this one is going to go on the getting rid of pile as well. So I skimmed through the prologue, which was some sort of like fable, fairy tale thing about a troll and the diamond, which wasn't really that interesting to me. And then I went into the first chapter, which opens to mysterious man is on mysterious errand, and that went on for way too long. And although I know that that is quite a classic fantasy opening, it's one of those openings that you see in quite a lot of fantasy books, but there wasn't really enough of a story there or a hook or anything that made this book stand out from other generic medieval fantasy books, especially when I compare the opening to this novel to a lot of the other books that I've been reading today. I really felt like in terms of concept and in terms of bringing something new to the table, this one definitely didn't compare very favorably. Lucky for me, that means I can make a bit of space on my shelves, and also lucky for me is that the other one I had by David Eddings, so Domes of Fire, actually happens to be in the same series. So I think this is like a follow-up series on the other one, which means I can get rid of all of them and feel good about cleaning up my shelves. Then I've got Witchfire, which has a strange apostrophe in the word witch, and I'm not entirely sure why, by James Clemens. To be honest, I only read a couple of pages of this one. I read the pre-prologue, so there's like a little bit of text and then the prologue and then the book starts. But I really enjoyed the pre-prologue. It was mysterious, it was interesting, it was well written. And because I have read a book by James Clemens before, although right now I can't really remember what that book was, but I do remember enjoying his storytelling before, so I'm feeling optimistic that I will like this book, so I'm quite happy to just keep it in my collection. I read the first chapter of Lords of the Middle Dark, and this is an interesting one. It seems like the kind of book that has a really strong conceptual slant rather than just, you know, a standard adventure type story. The setup, from what I understand, because in one chapter there's a lot going on that I'm just extrapolating really. Humanity has left Earth and some other humans have been left on Earth, but there is this magical mountain that no one returns from, and this guy goes up to the mountain and finds weird stuff there. It's a very strange concept, but I'm intrigued enough to keep this book, and I already have the rest of the series as well. I think it's 4 parts. It was weird enough that I'm quite happy to read some more from it at some other time. I've also looked into this one, which is Dragons of a Fallen Sun by Weiss and Hickman. I now realise that this is part of the Dragonlance series, and I don't think this is the first book in that series. It is the first book in a sub-series, but I imagine this might give quite a fair amount of spoilers for the original series. I did still have a little bit of a read. It has a really strong classic fantasy feel, so it really has that, oh, there's different races and they all dislike each other thing going on. So although I didn't read as deeply into this one as I have in some of the other books, I'm happy to just keep it for now. Because I don't have the actual start of this series, I feel like it's a little bit odd to get rid of it already because I don't know whether I will enjoy this series or not. So I will keep an eye out for the actual first book in the Dragonlance series, see if I can find it secondhand cheaply. Which brings me to the end of my little experiment. So eventually I have now decided that out of all the series that I tried, so there are 4 that I'm getting rid of and 5 that I'm keeping because I looked into 9 books. So the 4 series that I am getting rid of is Mageborn by Stephen Aryan and the other 2 books that I have. The Mirror of Her Dreams by Donaldson. I think this is only 2 books. And then also the entire series that is from David Eddings, so both The Diamond Throne and the other books that go with that, and Domes of Fire. I'm feeling pretty good about this. I liked having a little bit of a peruse in these books because I feel like I have been out of fantasy reading for a while, so I'm hoping that this will spark a little bit of interest in the books that I already own. And at the same time, it's really nice to clear up some of the books that have been on my shelves for a really long time and to curate my collection a little bit. I really see my book collection as a living collection, so not just something that is stagnant and books that I just buy and then leave on shelves for years and years. I really want my shelves to reflect where I am in that moment in my life. So I try to only keep books that I really think that I will enjoy in the future, that I would like to perhaps reread, that still quite excite me. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this little journey into a slightly different genre for my channel, but I hope you liked it anyway. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!